They laughed when I cried. I built a menu that made them swallow their smiles. I flew into my hometown on December 23rd with a suitcase heavy on purpose and a small plan to be ordinary for once. I'm 31. I live in Chicago. I spend my life designing other people's important days' weddings that glow, galas that make headlines, retreats that finish on time. I'm not a celebrity. I'm the person who makes the hotels smell like success. I have my own place, a therapist on retainer I never use, and for reasons I couldn't name then, a recurring habit of going back home as if things could be rewritten by proximity. This time I thought they could. Flights were cheap. I had a free week. I packed thoughtful gifts, things meant to be held, and looked at a bottle of wine. I'd been saving for a day when I had time to savor it. I imagined a warm door, maybe a hug, a night where the past sat politely at the table and didn't make jokes about old wounds. My mother opened the door while squinting at her phone. "Finally decided to show up, huh?" she said without looking up. It wasn't a welcome. My father shuffled in behind her and offered a thin comment about the weather. Like the rest of the world was safer to remark on than my presence. My younger brother Carter came in with a beer and a grin that read, "This will be funny." He hollered, "Look who ditched her big city clients to drop off presents." His fiancée Amber followed, carrying their baby, June, and wearing a practiced smirk. Christmas Eve was a choreography of polite distance. I set the table like someone half remembering a role. I offered to help with the potatoes and got waved away. Conversation orbited around the baby. Amber held the room the way someone holds an audience, deliberately, performatively. When it came time to exchange gifts, I watched the family's moves with a planner's eye. Carter handed my mother a spa package in a practiced flourish. Amber gave my father a whiskey subscription box like she was curating his hobbies. When I opened their gift, chipped mug with the clearance sticker still dangling under the rim, "World's okay, sister," no one laughed. They didn't need to. They'd built their punchline in the pauses. At dinner, I kept my voice small. "We pulled off a 5,000-guest charity gala 2 weeks ago," I said, more out of habit than vanity. Carter shrugged and said, "Some people plan parties. Some people do real work." Laughter filled the chairs. Then my mother, glass in hand, said, "At least this year you didn't cry like when your ex dumped you on Christmas." Carter and Amber laughed like a refrain. Even my father gave a soft, uncomfortable chuckle, as if it were part of family tradition. I left the room without a scene. I found the old bedroom now, storage, closed the door, and let the silence fall. No one knocked. No one checked. At 10:47 p.m., I typed one line into the family chat, "Thanks for the hospitality." "Heading back early tomorrow?" No replies. I left before dawn, the windshield crusted in frost, the car half full of regret. Back in Chicago, I deleted the group chat before the highway signs blurred. 5 years earlier. My fiancé cheated on me with someone close enough to pass for family. The part that kept lodging in my throat wasn't that he left it, was that they watched it like it was a sitcom. Carter knew. He didn't tell me. He told a cousin who told a friend who told Amber, who started telling the story as if it were a joke. My mother told it with the cadence of an anecdote. They treated my pain like a recurring sketch. On the drive back to the city, winter fields sliding by and the radio talking about nothing important, decision formed like frost on glass. If they wanted to make my holidays the kind of thing they could laugh about, I would make them the kind of holidays they couldn't laugh off. I wouldn't explode. I would be surgical. I would design experiences perfect, polite, and precise that put the small cruelties under glass. They could either leave or look. There were tiny human moments that kept me steady. The bar across from my apartment that poured the exact cocktail I liked when my hands trembled. The neighbor who left a jar of lemon curd in a note because she'd found me on the stoop late once and felt worried. Those small civilities reminded me that belonging wasn't one person or place. It was an accumulation of tiny, consistent acts. I listed them in the back of my planner, like threads to weave a new fabric of family. A month after that drive, I started with Easter. Not a potluck, not a church brunch and event I could hang a press release on. I sent digital invitations with RSVPs, a dress code labeled Spring Elegance, valet details for older guests, assigned seating, and menu previews, so no one could say I was vague. I arranged a stroller-friendly path by the window for June and a mimosa station with botanical accents. I designed an adult egg, hunt 20 eggs, color-coded maps, baskets, and handwritten notes. On Easter morning, my apartment looked like a magazine spread. Fresh peonies. Menus set in soft serif fonts at each place card. Carter poured himself a triple mimosa. Amber declared the kitchen smelled like a 5-star hotel. My mother said fancy, like that explained everything. I handed out the maps with a smile. My mother opened an egg that read, "Remember when you framed my 5th grade art award but spelled my name wrong?" She laughed too quickly and slipped it into her purse. Carter's egg read, "Who told Grandma I was failing math in 10th before I had the chance to tell her myself." He shrugged with the habit of people who have practiced guilt into a shrug. Amber's note said, "You said I was 2? Intense before you even knew me." Twice, and chewed the corner of the ribbon with a face that betrayed a private memory the gift bags at each place held. Chocolates printed with phrases like, "Not all scars are visible. Some get reshared over pie." Amber kept reading hers and folding the wrapper like a talisman. Nobody started an argument that day. No one stormed out. They went home, and Carter thanked me the next morning with that odd, impersonal mode of communication he used his and email that called the brunch surprisingly elegant but omitted the maps. 8. In the empty place card I had set for the ghost of support. 2 months later, I booked a rustic lodge for Thanksgiving wood beams, fireplace, a long table. I pre-assigned rooms, left cozy robes on each bed, and mounted a corkboard in the main room labeled Wall of Thanks. I was the first to pin something. "Thanks for teaching me independence by forgetting my graduation." My mother stood in front of the board as if reading a foreign language. Dinner was family style. I arranged the seating so the awkward proximities did half the work. I brought out a custom card game I designed questions that read like icebreakers until someone pulled. "What's something you regret never apologizing for?" Carter tried to pass. I offered him a penalty drink. He pulled another card. "Which lie hurts someone you love? And why did you tell it?" He laughed at first, the brittle laugh of a practiced deflection, then went quiet. Later that weekend, I unearthed an old scrapbook labeled Happy Memories. Inside were photos that pretended absence-away snapshots from trips I apparently opted out of because sick or busy. Programs with parents' names printed big while my sticky notes said, "You promised. You said you'd be here." Discovery turned into evidence. Each caption landed like a small indictment. At the lodge, I played back an old voicemail, Amber, years ago, mimicking me crying on a group call. For them it had been entertainment. In that cabin, a joke without an audience loses its edges and becomes something else sharp, exposed. No one offered me apologies as they left. Dust rose from their tires like a final punctuation. I sat with my planner and penciled the holidays in red. Christmas was coming. I had been deliberate enough to know precision feels cruel when the truth has teeth. After Easter, small ripples started. A cousin sent a photo of a festival I'd apparently skipped, and I realized I was no longer the silent subject of someone else's collage. I was an editor deciding which images mattered. My planner filled with more than client names. It held dates circled in red, the ones that used to ache in my chest. I learned to answer inquiries with paired truth. I was creating space where absence used to be curated. People didn't always like that answer. They often preferred the joke. For Christmas, I called the event Nostalgia Night and built what I called the shadow tree. No garlands. No glitter, just bare branches clipped with black and white photos of moments where the camera found everyone but me. Ornaments bore tags, missed recital, voicemail. 11:59 p.m., birthday text no reply. On the record player played minor key carols, and between songs, carefully chosen audio clips voicemails I had left that had gone unanswered. A home recording where my voice was background noise, and a saved group call clip of Carter imitating me crying years ago when they entered. The place read like a small museum exhibit. They started in clusters. Some scanned and smirked. Some searched the edges for a punchline. One place card remained empty. It read for the ghost of support. I passed small boxes after the main course. Carter's contained a mock failing report card labeled accountability. Amber's a flash drive marked whispers and weddings. My mother's contained a pawn ticket for the necklace she'd once given, and later claimed she must have misplaced. The booklets I handed out at Desert the Girl Who Didn't Matter were thin stories, showing the slow architecture of being unseen. My father called the evening mean-spirited. My mother said I was making the holiday about myself. I looked at them and said, gently, "You made it about me the night you laughed when I cried." Carter and Amber stood, grabbed coats without looking back. My father lingered, said he'd help clean, then left. That night my mother's text read, "You've made your point. I hope you're satisfied." I burned that need for dramatic apologies on the back burner and turned to plan Mother's Day instead. Mother's Day was the one I saved like a final note. I booked a tea at Rosegate Estate, the exact place my mother had chosen to attend a fundraiser instead of my middle school play. She'd posted a photo in a green satin dress while I stood backstage in costume. I wore a replica of that dress. The table was on a terraced lawn with white linens, tiered trays, and a piano played just far enough to be private. Each menu item had a name: the forgotten cupcake, the misrehearsal tart, the promised scone. I slid a small album across the table, titled almost. Inside I had preserved programs and flyers where her name appeared under "Will attend." Sticky notes I'd affixed that read, "You promised. You said you'd be here." When she asked if I was making a point, I said I was revisiting recipes. Halfway through the second course, I read a letter I'd written. I thanked her for strengths I admired: style, work ethic, and then I wrote about the absences, the unreturned phone calls, the half-hearted claps, the times she chose somewhere else to be. Other guests glanced over. She folded, stood, and walked off mid-tea. Later I left the album with a note: "You were always excellent at leaving first." Father's Day was quieter. I invited my father to a game night at my apartment and brought out a custom board game Truth and Penalty hand-painted tiles, a spinner, and questions that were easy until they weren't. We started light. He answered effortlessly the easy ones. Then a red tile: "Name a time you watched someone hurt me and did nothing." He chose a penalty: "Refill your drink and lose a turn." Another red tile asked, "Why didn't you speak up when Mom mocked her daughter's breakup?" He said he was trying to keep the peace. I told him peace without fairness looks like comfort for the comfortable. He looked older than I remembered and left with a slow, quiet step. After Father's Day, I decided the last holiday on my list wouldn't include them. A year after the Christmas that had reset everything, snow fell on the anniversary of that dinner. I cooked for 6 friends, neighbors, colleagues, who showed up when it mattered. The table had placed cards written in gold ink for people who answered. I used the chipped mug they'd given me, Worlds Okay, still visible, and drank from it without polishing it. That night I burned a letter from my mother in the fireplace. It was the sort of missive that begins sweetly and ends with, "You'll understand one day when you're a mother." The smoke rose, tidy and final. Carter texted later, "So, are you just done with us then?" I didn't reply. I deleted the thread and walked through the quiet of my apartment in the soft aftertaste of soup and laughter. In the months after the lodge, strangers began seeping into my chosen family in small, incandescent ways. There was the barista who stayed late to listen to me fumble through a retreat plan. The neighbor who returned a lost glove with a note, "Saw this on the stoop. Thought of you," and the colleague who drove me to an event at midnight when my tire blew. These people slipped into my life with a quiet gravity that hurt in the best way. They asked nothing and offered presents. They became compadres in a life I used to reserve for people who were good at being seen. I didn't stage dramatic confrontations. I curated moments. The holidays were invitations with an agenda. Listen, acknowledge, and if you can't, leave gracefully. The effect was not always immediate. Some came, scanned the evidence, and left. Others stayed awkwardly and learned day by day that the decor did half the talking. Months later, a message arrived from Carter, an old question. Thin and defensive. "Are you really done with us?" I had already changed my number quietly. I didn't need to explain. I had learned that absence, enforced and thoughtful, can be clearer than any sermon. Months after I began sending curated invites, the calls slowed and the group chat quieted. My mother came to a brunch once because she couldn't resist fresh flowers. She left early, but slid a note across the table that read, "I see." Carter sent a brief birthday text months later. It was safe and parsable. Amber liked a photo online and moved on. My father and I traded messages, polite, then gradually realer. It wasn't a reconciliation so much as a loosening of the old script. In a small village, a cat named Whiskers discovered a magic fish in a pond. The fish promised 3 wishes in exchange for its freedom. Whiskers wished for endless fish, a cozy bed, and a bell that rang softly. The fish granted all 3 wishes and swam away, leaving Whiskers content and purring in the sun. The life I planned for others began filling my calendar. I took a job that required travel and booked myself into rooms where I didn't have to perform for people who'd made my childhood a punchline. I found friends who would arrive if I asked and didn't make me justify an empty chair. One rainy Saturday, a neighbor knocked because my row of holiday lights had gone dark. They stayed for soup and later came back for a birthday dinner. They said unexpectedly, "You deserved better company long before you did this." I laughed because they were right. I kept the planner folded in a drawer, map of holidays fixed, and those still in progress. I still hear small aches, afternoons when grief passes like a civility, tidy and delicate. I don't write them away. I name them in the margins and let them sit in a box labeled work in progress. When they knock, I light a candle and let the house remember it's big enough for softer rooms. There were afternoons when the old habits intruded, the reflex to explain myself, the urge to make a gallery out of every slight. I learned to let the story be what it is, and to share only with people who sat still long enough to listen. I started teaching workshops about social architecture and seating plans, using the retreats and dinners as case studies. During one class, a woman asked, "How do you invite people who hurt you without letting them reset the pattern?" I looked at her and said, "You don't invite them to reset you. You invite them to witness the work you've done. Then you choose whether their witnessing changes anything." Christmas came and went the next year differently. My family sent a card. I filed it. I spent the night with people who cheered for stories where everyone was seen. We drank from china I liked and laughed with real applause. Afterwards, I framed a line I had written weeks before and hung it by the door. Let them forget you the way they once forgot to love you. It isn't a threat. It isn't punishment. It's a manual for survival. I keep it low, near my keys, so I see it when I leave. Forgiveness, if you want the word, is layered. I forgave some things that couldn't be changed and refused others. I didn't need to make them into villains. I simply rearranged who had seats at my table. The chipped mug? I still use it sometimes. Objects keep their histories whether we want them to or not. We keep rewriting pages. We choose who reads them. There was no cinematic finale. No slammed doors. No viral post. Just a series of carefully designed dinners and small invitations that demanded more honesty than they offered excuses. The rest is practice and peace that doesn't cost me anything. Not everyone will stay. Some will leave. Make peace with that. The rest is practice. Let them forget you the way they once forgot to love you. Not anymore.